They poured wine on her. Right there, under the chandeliers, in front of board members, investors, and every camera-hungry guest in the Meridian Systems gala. Sandra Hays laughed as the red wine slid down Marci Johnston's hair. Dan stood behind her grinning, like humiliating a stranger was part of the entertainment. What neither of them knew was that this stranger they mocked was the silent majority stakeholder behind their $750 million deal. Phones were already recording. Whispers spread before the last drop hit her dress. Marci didn't shout, didn't flinch. She simply lifted her chin, stepped out of the spotlight, and walked toward the exit. And the fallout began before Sandra or Dan understood what they'd just destroyed. Before we go any further, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. Tell us where you're watching from. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Now let's begin. You know those nights where the champagne sparkles, but something rotten lies beneath the crystal? That was the night Marci Johnston walked into the Meridian Systems gala. She wore a crimson dress that commanded attention, her natural hair styled in soft waves, gold jewelry minimal but deliberate. The kind of presence powerful people noticed because it refused to apologize. She preferred it that way. Let them wonder. Chandeliers cast warm light across marble floors. A jazz trio played something smooth that dissolved into background noise. The scent of orchids mixed with aged wine and expensive cologne. Phones were everywhere. Nobody wanted to miss proof they'd made it into this room. On every screen near the entrance, one announcement dominated. Meridian Systems. Their massive $750 million partnership with a mystery tech investment firm was the only conversation that mattered. Servers whispered about it near the kitchen doors. Guests name-dropped connections like they'd brokered it themselves. Marci moved through the crowd with deliberate slowness, posture relaxed, gaze measuring every face. A hostess at the VIP checkpoint had paused when she approached, eyes scanning the list twice before reluctantly waving her through. The woman's smile had been tight, confused. Inside, that same energy trailed her. 3 executives in designer suits shifted their circle tighter as she passed, closing ranks like she might interrupt. A woman with diamonds at her throat glanced at Marci's dress, then whispered something to her companion that made them both smirk. A server offering champagne flutes hesitated, as if uncertain whether to approach her. Marci accepted a glass of sparkling water and said nothing. No need to correct assumptions. If the evening unfolded as she intended, corrections wouldn't be necessary. At the front of the ballroom, lights shifted toward the stage as a voice boomed through speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Meridian Systems celebration of excellence. Applause erupted like a trained response. Marci positioned herself near a marble column, close enough to observe, distant enough to remain overlooked. The MC's smile stretched too wide. Tonight, we celebrate a transformative alliance. $750 million. A contract that will redefine our market position and secure our future. You could feel ambition thicken in the air, sharp and hungry. Then they appeared. Sandra Hays swept onto the stage in an emerald gown that caught every spotlight, her expression radiating entitlement. Beside her stood Dan, polished and smug in his tailored navy suit, hand resting possessively on the small of her back. The crowd watched them like celebrities at a premiere. Everyone watched them. Everyone except the woman who controlled the firm about to make or break that deal. Marci. The murmurs started before Marci even shifted position. Heads turned in her direction, guests studying her from the corners of their vision, leaning close to share observations like she'd wandered in from the wrong event. A woman in pearls stage whispered to her husband, "Is she supposed to be in this section? I don't recognize her from the executive list." Her husband adjusted his glasses. "Maybe she's with one of the vendor teams. Bold choice wearing red to a business gala." Marci heard it. She always did. Her expression remained serene, her movements unhurried. The carpet felt plush beneath her heels, expensive enough to muffle every sound. She observed the stage from her chosen distance, shoulders back, chin level. Sandra noticed her first. Her mouth curved into something cold, recognition of a challenge she hadn't anticipated. She said something sharp to Dan, and his expression darkened. Dan stepped off the stage with practiced confidence, crossing the floor straight toward Marci. His smile looked rehearsed. "Excuse me, miss. Are you certain you're in the right area?" He gestured vaguely toward the back. "General seating is through those doors." Marci kept her voice steady. "I'm exactly where I need to be." Dan's laugh came out forced. "Right. Observing." He signaled a server with a snap. "Someone get her situated properly. This section is reserved." A few guests turned fully now, no longer pretending not to notice. A man in a gray suit muttered just loud enough. How did security miss that? Sandra joined them next, heels clicking a precise rhythm against marble. She lifted a glass of red wine from a passing tray without acknowledging the server's presence. Her eyes traveled slowly over Marci, assessing and dismissing in one sweep. "Sweetheart, if you're looking for the networking mixer, that's tomorrow night." Her tone dripped false sweetness. "This event is invitation only. Very exclusive." Marci said nothing. Her composure seemed to unsettle them further. Sandra stepped closer, wine glass raised slightly. "I'm going to need you to head to the correct area. We can't have confusion during the signing." When Marci didn't move, Sandra's smile vanished. "Are you seriously going to make this difficult?" Dan reached for the glass in Sandra's hand. "Allow me to clarify the situation." He lifted it higher, making sure nearby guests could see. One less distraction for the evening. Then he tilted it forward, pouring the burgundy liquid directly over Marci's head and shoulders. The wine hit warm and sharp. It soaked through her hair, ran down her temples, stained the crimson fabric of her dress darker. Gasps cut through the music. Someone's voice rose in shock. "Oh my God, did that just happen?" Another person lifted their phone higher, screen glowing as they captured the moment. Sandra's laugh was quiet but clear. Maybe now she understands the dress code. Marci closed her eyes briefly, felt the weight of the wine dripping from her chin. She lifted one hand, wiped her jaw with controlled precision, straightened her posture, and walked toward the exit without uttering a single syllable. A server pressed against the wall whispered as she passed. She walked out like a queen. Nobody believed it meant anything. Yet, the hallway beyond the ballroom felt cooler, almost silent after the chaos of voices she'd left behind. Marci walked with measured steps, fingertips brushing the wine-soaked fabric clinging to her skin. She exhaled once, slow and deliberate, then reached into her clutch and pulled out her phone. The screen illuminated her face with pale light. She tapped one contact. A voice answered immediately. "Ms. Johnston, go ahead." Marci's voice remained perfectly calm. "Terminate the Meridian agreement. Full withdrawal. Public statement within the hour." "Understood. Executing now." She ended the call without emotion. A couple near the elevator stared at her, trying to place her face from somewhere they couldn't quite remember. But that was later. Before the wine, before the call, before everything shattered, Marci had entered that ballroom with one clear purpose. Not to celebrate. Not to be celebrated. To watch. 3 hours earlier, her CFO had leaned across the conference table, tablet glowing between them. The Meridian deal is solid on paper. Financials check out. Their tech division shows real innovation. But Marci had looked up. But company culture is harder to quantify. Their last 2 diversity officers left within 18 months. Exit interviews were sealed, but the pattern speaks. Marci had closed the folder slowly. "Then I need to see it myself." Her assistant had protested. "You're the majority stakeholder. You don't need to attend their gala incognito. Send representatives. Numbers lie less than people, but people reveal more than numbers." Marci had stood, decision made. "I want to know who I'm trusting with $750 million. So she'd chosen the red dress deliberately. Not to blend in, to stand out and observe how they responded to someone who looked like her, dressed like that, in their space. The test wasn't about her comfort. It was about their character. Now, moving through the Meridian ballroom, Marci felt every glance like a weight. She positioned herself near the bar, close to clusters of executives, but not among them. A perfect vantage point. 2 senior managers stood 3 feet away, voices low but not low enough. Investment firm representatives are supposed to check in at the executive table. The older one muttered, adjusting his cufflinks. "Protocol." His colleague shrugged. "Maybe she's +1. Someone's date trying to network." Bold strategy wearing something that bright. Reed's desperate. Marci sipped her water, expression unchanged. She'd heard worse. The question wasn't whether they'd judge her. The question was what they'd do with that judgment. A woman in a silver pantsuit approached the bar, ordering gin with precision. She glanced at Marci, then did a subtle double take, her gaze lingering on the red dress. Her smile was practiced, distant. First time at a Meridian event. The question sounded polite. The tone wasn't. First time, Marci confirmed. It's quite exclusive. Most attendees have been with the company for years. Legacy relationships, you know. She collected her drink. Are you in tech? Investment. The woman's eyebrows lifted slightly. Oh, which firm? Marci smiled, warm and noncommittal. I keep a low profile. Right. The word came clipped. The woman walked away, already whispering to a colleague before she'd crossed 10 feet. From her position, Marci watched the room's dynamics unfold like a choreographed performance. The Meridian executives clustered in the center, voices loud, laughter louder. Junior staff orbited the periphery, attentive and invisible. Vendors and partners stood in careful groupings, networking with surgical precision. And then there was her, alone, observing. A server approached with a tray of hors d'oeuvres, his smile genuine. "Would you like to try the crab cakes? They're excellent tonight." "Thank you." Marci accepted one, noting he was the first person in 30 minutes to treat her presence as simply normal. 3 executives drifted closer, deep in conversation about quarterly projections. One noticed Marci and his sentence faltered mid-thought. He leaned toward his companions. "Is that someone from the tech journalism pool? I don't remember approving media for the VIP section. She doesn't have a press badge." "Then who invited her?" The third executive, a woman with sharp features, studied Marci more carefully. "Maybe she's with the diversity initiative. You know, for optics." They laughed quietly, the sound designed not to carry but perfectly audible. Marci turned slightly, giving them her profile. Let them wonder. Let them make assumptions. Every reaction was data. Near the stage, a photographer circulated, capturing candid moments of executives networking, shaking hands, raising glasses. When he approached Marci, his camera already lifting, a Meridian coordinator intercepted him. "Focus on the executive tables," she instructed quietly. "We need content for the promotional materials." The photographer hesitated, glancing at Marci's striking red dress. She'd photograph well. Good color contrast. Stick to the approved list. The coordinator's tone left no room for negotiation. "Do you think Marci should have revealed who she was right then, or was staying silent the right move? Drop your thoughts in the comments." Marci felt the exclusion like a door closing. Not painful, informative. She made a mental note. Even the visual narrative of the company was curated to exclude certain images of power. A junior executive, maybe late 20s, broke from his group and approached her with what looked like genuine curiosity. His smile seemed less calculated than the others. "I don't think we've met. I'm Marcus, business development." He extended his hand. Marci shook it. "Marci, are you here with one of the partner firms?" His question felt like actual interest, not interrogation. "Something like that." "Well, welcome. Fair warning, these events can be a bit." He searched for the word, insular. "Don't take it personally if people seem guarded. Everyone's posturing for the next promotion." His honesty surprised her. Noted. "The real conversations happen after events like this anyway. This is just theater." He grinned, then caught sight of his supervisor signaling him. "Duty calls. Enjoy the evening." Marci watched him rejoin his group. One small crack in the pattern. One person who treated her like a professional equal without needing her credentials first. But one person wasn't a culture. Across the room, Sandra Hays descended from the stage, her emerald dress catching light like armor. Her gaze swept the ballroom with proprietary satisfaction, landing on faces she recognized, skipping past those she didn't. When her eyes reached Marci, they stopped. The assessment was instant and cold. Sandra's expression shifted from neutral to something harder. She said something to Dan, her hand touching his arm, her chin gesturing subtly in Marci's direction. Dan followed her gaze. His face registered the same calculation. Who is she? Why is she here? Why is she alone? Marci felt the moment crystallize. The test was about to become a confrontation. She straightened slightly, shoulders back, chin level, meeting Sandra's stare across 50 feet of marble and malice. This was why she'd come. Not for the champagne or the speeches or the celebration of a deal that existed only on paper. She'd come to see what happened when power encountered something it didn't recognize, didn't expect, didn't want. Sandra began moving toward her, Dan following close behind. Their expressions carried purpose now, the kind that came before someone got removed from somewhere they supposedly didn't belong. Marci didn't move, didn't retreat, didn't reach for her phone to prove credentials or call for backup. She simply waited. Calm. Ready. Let them come. Sandra Hays moved through the crowd like she owned every inch of floor beneath her feet. People stepped aside without being asked, conversations pausing as she passed. Dan trailed her by half a step, his expression matching hers, predatory and assured. Marci tracked their approach in her peripheral vision. She didn't turn to face them, didn't adjust her posture. She simply remained where she stood, glass of water in hand, gaze still sweeping the ballroom as if their arrival meant nothing. That seemed to irritate Sandra more. They stopped 3 feet away, close enough to invade space without touching. Sandra's perfume arrived first, heavy and expensive, the kind that announced itself in every room. Her smile was thin, sharp at the edges. "I don't believe we've met." The words sounded like an accusation. Marci turned slowly, meeting Sandra's eyes with quiet composure. "We haven't." Sandra Hays, Executive VP of Operations. "This is Dan Cooper, our Chief Financial Officer." She gestured without looking at him, her focus locked on Marci. "And you are?" Marci. The single name hung in the air. Sandra's smile tightened further. Just Marci. Not a question. A judgment. For now. Dan stepped closer, arms crossed over his chest. His voice carried the practiced authority of someone used to being obeyed. We make it a point to know everyone in the VIP section. Security is very particular about the guest list. How exactly did you get cleared? I was invited. By whom? Sandra's tone sharpened. Someone who thought I should be here. Sandra's laugh came out cold. That's not an answer. See, Dan and I have been planning this event for 6 months. Every name, every firm, every connection was personally vetted by us. So forgive me if I'm having trouble placing you. Marci took a slow sip of her water, unhurried. Perhaps your list wasn't as complete as you thought. The muscles in Dan's jaw tightened. You're being deliberately vague. That tells me you know you're somewhere you don't belong. Does it? Listen, Sandra's voice dropped lower, more menacing. I've been in this industry for 15 years. I know every major player, every investment firm, every competitor worth knowing. I've never seen your face. Not at conferences, not at summits, not in any boardroom that matters. Maybe you weren't looking in the right rooms. Sandra's eyes flashed. She glanced around quickly, confirming that several nearby guests had paused their conversations, attention drifting toward the confrontation. She seemed to recalibrate, her voice rising just enough to be overheard. Are you here representing a firm, or are you freelancing? The question was designed to sound professional. The subtext was clear. Prove you belong or leave. I'm here on business. What business? Dan pressed. Give me a firm name. A credential. Something. Marci met his stare calmly. I don't report to you. The sentence landed like a slap. Dan's expression darkened instantly. Excuse me. You asked me a question. I chose not to answer it. That's my right. Sandra stepped between them, her smile gone entirely now. You're right. Let me clarify something, sweetheart. This is our event. Our company. Our celebration. You're a guest here, which means you follow our rules and answer our questions. That's how this works. I understood the rules when I accepted the invitation. Then act like it. Sandra's voice turned icy. Who? Sent. You. Marci said nothing. Her silence felt louder than words. A small crowd had formed now, executives pretending to refresh drinks or check phones while watching the exchange from close range. Whispers started circulating like ripples. Is that someone from a competitor? Maybe she's corporate espionage. I heard she refused to show credentials. Dan seized on the audience, his voice projecting now. This is exactly the kind of disruption we've worked to avoid tonight. Someone crashes a private event, refuses to identify themselves, makes everyone uncomfortable. I haven't made anyone uncomfortable, Marci said evenly. I've been standing here quietly for the past hour. Standing where you don't belong, Sandra snapped. Looking like you're casing the room. It's suspicious as hell. What's suspicious is your assumption that I don't belong. Sandra's face flushed. I'm not assuming anything. I'm going off facts. You won't name a firm. You won't name a contact. You're dressed. She gestured at the red dress with barely concealed disdain. Like you're here to be noticed, not to conduct business. My clothing bothers you. Your presence bothers me. Sandra stepped closer, voice dropping to something dangerous. You want to know what I think? I think you're someone who got hold of an invitation they shouldn't have. Maybe you bought it off someone. Maybe you forged it. Maybe you're a disgruntled ex-employee trying to make a scene during our biggest night. Marci's expression didn't change. And what scene am I making? I'm standing here, drinking water, observing. Observing, Dan repeated mockingly. That's what you said earlier. You know who observes? Journalists looking for scandal. Competitors gathering intelligence. People with agendas. Everyone here has an agenda. Not like yours. Sandra's voice turned harsh. You know what? I'm done playing games. Security should have caught this at the door. Dan, get Marcus from the team. Have him verify her credentials properly, or escort her out. Do you think Sandra and Dan would have acted this way if Marci had been a man in a suit? Or was this always about power and control? Let us know what you think in the comments. Dan pulled out his phone, already dialing. On it, Marci remained perfectly still, her calm somehow making Sandra more agitated. A bead of sweat formed at Sandra's temple despite the cool air conditioning. Her hands clenched at her sides. You're not going to defend yourself? Not going to make a call to whoever supposedly invited you? I don't need to defend myself. Because you can't. Sandra's smile returned, vicious and satisfied. You crashed this event thinking you could blend in, maybe network your way into something. But you picked the wrong night and the wrong company. We don't tolerate people who think the rules don't apply to them. Interesting perspective, Marci said softly. Tell me, Sandra, do the rules apply to everyone equally here? Or just to people who look a certain way? The question hung in the air like a lit fuse. Sandra's face went rigid. What did you just say? I asked a simple question. You're implying something ugly. Sandra's voice rose, drawing more attention. You're trying to make this about something it's not. This is about protocol, about security, about protecting our guests and our company from people who don't belong. And who decides who belongs? I do. Sandra's voice turned absolute. This is my event, my responsibility, my company, and I've decided you need to leave. Marci glanced at Dan, who had finished his call and was watching with his arms crossed, expression smug. She looked back at Sandra, reading the entitlement in every line of her posture, the certainty that she held all the power in this moment. This was the test's conclusion, not the microaggressions, not the whispers. This, the moment when people with authority decided that someone didn't deserve to share their space and felt justified using that authority to remove them. Marci had seen enough. I'm not leaving, she said quietly. Sandra's eyes widened. Then you're going to be removed. By whom? Security is on their way. Dan stepped forward, positioning himself beside Sandra. And if you resist, it's going to be a lot more embarrassing for you than it needs to be. Embarrassing, Marci repeated, as if tasting the word. You're threatening to humiliate me in front of all these people because I won't answer your questions? We're protecting our event from someone who refuses to follow basic protocols, Sandra corrected. There's a difference. Is there? Sandra's patience snapped. She grabbed a wine glass from a passing server's tray, the motion sharp and sudden. The server stumbled slightly, confused, but Sandra had already turned back to Marci. You want to stand here and play victim? Fine. Let me give you something to actually complain about. She raised the glass. Red wine caught the chandelier light, dark as blood. The room seemed to inhale. Marci didn't move, didn't flinch. She simply stood there, meeting Sandra's furious gaze with something colder than anger. Calm certainty. Dan's hand touched Sandra's arm. Whether to encourage or restrain was unclear. His smile suggested encouragement. Last chance, Sandra said, voice shaking with rage. Walk out now, or I make an example of you. Marci's response was barely a whisper, but it carried. Do what you think is right. Sandra's hand tilted forward, but then she stopped. The glass hovered in the air, trembling slightly. Sandra's eyes narrowed as if a new thought had occurred to her, something more calculated than rage. She lowered the wine slowly, a cruel smile replacing the fury. Actually, no, you're not worth the stain on this marble. Dan leaned in, his voice carrying just far enough for the growing circle of onlookers to hear. I think I know what this is. Sandra, look at her. Really look. Sandra's gaze raked over Marci again, this time with exaggerated scrutiny. Her expression shifted from anger to something worse, mocking realization. Oh my God. Sandra's hand went to her mouth in fake surprise. Dan, I think we've made a mistake. Have we? She's not a gatecrasher. Sandra's voice dripped with false sweetness. She's staff. Look at how she's standing there, waiting. She's probably catering or events coordination. That's why she won't name a firm. A few uncomfortable laughs rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered, no way. Dan picked up the thread immediately, his tone shifting to exaggerated patience. That explains everything. The confusion at the door, the vague answers. She's working tonight, and got turned around. He looked directly at Marci. Sweetheart, the staff entrance is around back. Kitchen access is through the service hallway. Marci's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. Not hurt. Assessment. I'm not staff, she said quietly. Right. Sandra nodded with theatrical understanding. You're management. Supervisor of something. That's why you're dressed up. Makes sense now. I'm not staff, Marci repeated, her voice level but firmer. Dan's smile widened. Then what are you? Because you're clearly not an executive. You're not a partner. You're not anyone's plus one, or you'd have said so by now. He paused. So that leaves pretty much one option. You're here to work. Maybe she's the coat check, someone behind them muttered. Another person snickered. Sandra seized on the audience's reaction, her confidence growing. Look, there's no shame in it. Honest work. But you need to be in the right section. This area is reserved for company executives and investment partners only. The people who actually built this deal. I understand exactly who belongs here, Marci said. Do you? Sandra's voice hardened. Because you're still standing in the wrong place. If you're not going to be honest about why you're here, then I'm going to make an educated guess. You're either staff who got confused, or you're someone who somehow got an invitation and thought you could pretend to be something you're not. Dan stepped closer, lowering his voice to something that sounded reasonable but wasn't. Just between us, which is it? Did someone give you their invitation? It happens. People sell them sometimes. We're not trying to get you in trouble. We just need you to go where you're supposed to be. I am where I'm supposed to be. Sandra's patience snapped audibly. No, you're not. She turned to address the crowd now, playing to them. This is exactly what we've been dealing with all night. People thinking they can show up anywhere just because they want to. No credentials, no transparency, no respect for the people who actually earned their place here. Earned, Marci repeated softly. Yes, earned. Sandra turned back to her. Dan and I have dedicated 15 years to this company. We've closed deals, built relationships, sacrificed time with our families to make Meridian what it is. This celebration, we earned it. These guests, they earned their invitations through actual professional achievement. And you think I haven't? I think you're dodging every question we ask, which tells me everything I need to know. Sandra crossed her arms. So let me be crystal clear. I'm asking you, one final time, to identify yourself properly or leave this section. Those are your only two options. Marci didn't move. The silence stretched for 3 long seconds. Dan shook his head slowly. Unbelievable. Sandra, she's literally refusing a direct instruction from company leadership. I see that. Sandra's voice went cold. You know what? Fine. Stay there. Don't move. Security will physically escort you out in about 2 minutes, and everyone here will watch it happen. That's the scene you want to make? We'll give it to you. I'm not making a scene, Marci said. You are. The comment landed like a challenge. Sandra's face flushed deep red. What did you say? I said you're the one making a scene. I've been standing here quietly. You approached me. You've been interrogating me, threatening me, insulting me in front of all these people. I haven't raised my voice once. Because you have nothing to say. Sandra's voice rose sharply. You have no defense because you know you don't belong here. I belong here more than you know. Dan laughed, harsh and dismissive. Really? Prove it. One phone call. One name. One piece of evidence that you have any legitimate reason to be in this room. He pulled out his own phone. Or I can call the head of security right now and have this handled the hard way. What do you think Marci should do in this moment? Reveal who she is, or let them keep digging their own grave? Drop your thoughts below. Marci glanced at his phone, then back at his face. You should do what you think is necessary. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting. Sandra stepped forward until she was inches from Marci's face. Her voice dropped to a venomous whisper that still carried to the nearby guests. I know exactly what you are. You're someone who thought you could slip into this world wearing a red dress and confidence, hoping nobody would question you too hard. You saw the invitation, maybe online, maybe through someone who actually belongs here, and you thought, why not? I'll crash it. I'll network. I'll pretend. Marci's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Sandra saw it and smiled viciously. That hit close, didn't it? You know what's sad? If you'd just been honest, if you'd come to us and said, I'm trying to break into this industry, can you give me advice? We might have helped. But instead, you lied. You played games. You made us look like the bad guys for enforcing basic security. You're enforcing assumptions, Marci said quietly. Not security. Assumptions based on your behavior. Based on my appearance. The accusation hung in the air. Several people in the crowd shifted uncomfortably. Dan stepped in quickly. Don't do that. Don't make this about something it's not. This is about protocol, plain and simple. Anyone who refuses to identify themselves gets questioned. That would be true regardless of what they looked like. Would it? Marci's gaze swept across both of them. Tell me honestly, if I were a white man in a Navy suit standing exactly where I'm standing, saying exactly what I'm saying, would we be having this conversation? Sandra's expression went rigid. How dare you? How dare I what? Ask a question. You're playing the victim now? Really? Sandra's voice climbed higher. You crash our event, refuse to follow our rules, and then accuse us of discrimination when we try to maintain order? That's disgusting. What's disgusting, Marci said, her voice still maddeningly calm, is that you've decided I don't belong here based on nothing but your own prejudice, and you're dressing it up as professional concern. Dan's face darkened. You need to leave. Right now. Or what? Or we'll make you leave. You'll make me. Marci's eyes locked on his. Those are interesting words. Make me leave. Not ask. Not escort. Make. It's a figure of speech. Is it? Sandra grabbed the wine glass from the nearby table again, her hand shaking with rage. You want to stand here and lecture us about prejudice? In our own company? At our own event? While you're trespassing? I'm not trespassing. Yes, you are. Sandra's shout cut through the ballroom. The jazz trio faltered. Conversation stopped. Every head within 50 feet turned toward them. Sandra seemed to realize she'd lost composure, but instead of backing down, she leaned into it. She raised the wine glass high, her voice projecting across the now silent room. This woman refuses to identify herself. She refuses to leave when asked by company leadership. She's disrupting our celebration with accusations and games. Sandra's eyes blazed. Someone needs to teach her that actions have consequences. Dan placed his hand on her shoulder, but not to stop her, to support her. Maybe this will help clarify things, Sandra said, her voice dropping to something cold and final. "Maybe this will help you understand exactly where you stand." The wine glass tilted. Marci stood perfectly still, chin level, shoulders back. She didn't close her eyes. She didn't step back. She simply watched Sandra make her choice and waited for the consequences that would follow. The wine fell in slow motion, or maybe that was just how Marci's mind processed it. One moment the glass was tilted, catching the chandelier light. The next, burgundy liquid poured through the air in a dark cascade. It hit her forehead first, warm, heavier than she expected. The wine ran down her temples, soaked into her hairline, dripped past her ears. She felt it seep through the carefully styled waves, felt the weight of it pulling strands against her scalp. Then it cascaded lower, down her face, across her cheekbones, following the curve of her jaw. Droplets caught on her eyelashes. The wine stained her neck, ran between her collarbones, soaked into the crimson fabric of her dress until the two reds merged into one darker shade. Marci closed her eyes, not from shame, not from shock, but from something deeper. A moment of acknowledgement. This was the answer she'd come for. This was the culture laid bare. The ballroom held its breath. Sandra stood with the empty glass still raised, her chest heaving, a triumphant smile splitting her face. Beside her, Dan watched with his arms crossed, satisfaction radiating from his posture. Neither moved to apologize. Neither looked away. They wanted her to see their victory. Around them, the crowd had frozen mid-gesture. A woman's hand hung suspended near her mouth. A man's wine glass stopped halfway to his lips. A server stood paralyzed, tray tilted at a dangerous angle. Someone's phone was recording. Multiple phones, actually. The small screens glowing like distant stars in the dimmed ballroom lighting, all focused on the woman in the stained red dress. Marci opened her eyes slowly. Wine dripped from her chin, fell in soft patters against marble. A drop landed on her gold bracelet and slid off. Another soaked into the delicate strap of her dress. Her hair, so carefully styled hours ago, now hung heavy and wet against her shoulders. She lifted one hand, wiped her jaw with two fingers, the motion controlled and precise. Then she straightened her spine, rolled her shoulders back, and turned her head slightly to look at Sandra directly. Sandra's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. Something in Marci's eyes, calm, cold, certain, didn't match what Sandra expected to see. There was no humiliation there, no tears, no anger even, just calculation. "Feel better?" Marci's voice came out steady, quiet enough that people had to strain to hear it. Sandra's smile returned, harder now. "Much. Now you can leave with a story to tell. How you crashed a Meridian event and learned your lesson." Dan laughed, the sound sharp and ugly. "Maybe next time you'll think twice before pretending to be something you're not." Marci said nothing. She held Sandra's gaze for one more long moment, then let her eyes drift to Dan, then to the crowd of executives watching with expressions ranging from horror to barely concealed amusement. She was memorizing faces, recording details, building a list. A young woman near the back of the crowd looked away, shame coloring her cheeks. An older executive shifted his weight, suddenly interested in his phone. But most of them just watched, waiting to see what would happen next. Would she yell? Would she cry? Would she threaten legal action? Marci did none of those things. She adjusted the wine-soaked strap of her dress, her movements unhurried. She smoothed down the fabric where it clung wet against her skin. She wiped another drop of wine from her collarbone with the back of her hand. Then she turned and walked. Her heels clicked against the marble in a steady rhythm. One step, two, three. The crowd parted before her like water, people stumbling over themselves to get out of her path. Wine dripped behind her, leaving a faint trail across the pristine white floor. No one spoke. The jazz trio had stopped playing entirely. Even the servers stood frozen, uncertain whether to move or stay. Marci walked past the bar where she'd observed earlier, past the executive tables where people had whispered about her, past the stage where Sandra and Dan had stood like royalty minutes before. She didn't look back, didn't pause, didn't give them the satisfaction of a reaction. Behind her, the silence broke gradually. A nervous laugh, a whispered "holy shit," the rustle of movement as people pulled out phones or leaned toward their companions. Sandra's voice carried across the ballroom, loud and defensive. Someone had to do it. She was disrupting everything, making accusations, refusing to leave. She got what she deserved, Dan added. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. A few people murmured agreement. Others said nothing. But Marci heard none of it. She had already reached the ballroom doors, pushed them open with wine-stained hands, and stepped into the hallway beyond. The doors swung shut behind her with a soft click, muffling the rising chatter. The hallway felt different, cooler, quieter. The recessed lighting cast everything in soft gold, Such a contrast to the harsh exposure of the ballroom. Marci's footsteps echoed against walls lined with abstract art and polished wood panels. She walked 20 feet, 30, until she reached a small alcove with a velvet bench positioned beneath a massive mirror. Do you think there's any coming back from what Sandra and Dan just did, or did they cross a line that can't be uncrossed? Let us know in the comments. Marci stopped and looked at her reflection. Wine matted her hair against her forehead and temples. Dark rivulets had traced paths down her brown skin, some already drying, others still wet. Her dress, once a bold statement of confidence, now looked destroyed, the fabric heavy and stained beyond repair. Mascara had smudged slightly beneath one eye. She looked like someone who'd been assaulted. Because she had been. But her eyes still held that same steady calm. That same cold certainty. She reached into her clutch, miraculously still dry despite everything, and pulled out her phone. The screen came to life, bright and responsive. No cracks, no damage. Her hands were steady as she unlocked it. For a moment, she stood there looking at the device. At the array of contacts, messages, apps. All the power that fit in her palm. All the connections and leverage and authority that Sandra and Dan had no idea she possessed. She thought about the $750 million deal, about the 6 months of negotiations, the due diligence, the careful structuring of terms, about her firm's investment committee who had trusted her judgment, about the employees at Meridian who had no idea their leadership had just destroyed their company's future. She thought about Marcus, the young executive who'd been kind, about the server who'd offered her crab cakes with genuine warmth, about the photographer who'd wanted to include her in the promotional materials before being shut down. Good people working for toxic leadership. But that wasn't her problem to solve. Her responsibility was to her firm, her investors, her own integrity. And that responsibility had one clear answer. Marci scrolled through her contacts with a wine-stained thumb. Found the name she needed. Tapped it. The phone rang once. Ms. Johnston. The voice was crisp, alert despite the late hour. Her general counsel, Martin, always answered on the first ring. How's the gala? Marci's voice came out flat and final. Terminate the Meridian Systems agreement. Full withdrawal. Public statement within the hour. A pause. Not surprise. Martin knew better than to question her commands. But confirmation. All components. The equity investment, the tech partnership, the advisory board seats. Everything. Complete severance. I want every document pulled, every commitment voided, every bridge burned. Understood. The PR team will need a reason for the statement. Cultural incompatibility. Irreconcilable differences in corporate values. Keep it professional but final. Done. Legal will have the termination notices filed within 30 minutes. The public announcement will go out at, she heard him checking, 10:45 p.m. 20 minutes from now. Perfect. Ms. Johnston, are you all right? The question hung in the air. Marci looked at her reflection again. At the wine still dripping from her hair. At the ruin of her dress. At the woman who'd been publicly humiliated in front of 200 people. I'm fine, Martin. Just disappointed. In Meridian? In people who mistake power for permission. Another pause. I'll have the car brought around to the side entrance. Avoid the main doors. Thank you. And Ms. Johnston? For what it's worth, I'm sorry you had to see their true nature this way. I'm not. Marci's voice carried something sharp now, something cold. Better to know before we committed any further. Imagine if we'd found out 6 months from now, after the money was already transferred. Silver lining then. Every cloud has one. Execute the termination. I'll check the statements from the car. She ended the call and slipped the phone back into her clutch. For 10 seconds, Marci stood in that hallway, alone with her reflection and the sound of her own breathing. Then she straightened her shoulders one final time, lifted her chin, and walked toward the side exit. Behind her, in the ballroom, Sandra and Dan were celebrating, accepting congratulations for handling the disruption, laughing about the woman who'd gotten exactly what she deserved. They had no idea the floor was about to drop out from under them. Marci smiled as she pushed through the exit door. She smiled because in 18 minutes, they would know. In 18 minutes, everything would change. The side exit opened onto a service corridor that ran the length of the building. Concrete floors, industrial lighting, the faint hum of HVAC systems pushing air through hidden vents. It smelled like cleaning solution and the ghost of cigarette smoke from maintenance workers who'd stepped out hours ago. Marci's heels echoed differently here. Sharper, more pronounced. Each step marked time like a countdown. She walked past a custodial closet, a delivery bay entrance, an unmarked door that probably led to electrical systems. The corridor was empty, abandoned at this hour except for the woman in the wine-stained dress moving through it like she belonged anywhere she chose to be. At the end of the hallway, an elevator bank. 3 doors, polished steel reflecting her ruined appearance back at her. Marci pressed the call button and waited. The elevator arrived with a soft chime. Empty. She stepped inside, turned, and watched the doors slide closed on the service corridor, sealing her into a small box of mirrors and fluorescent light. Her reflection surrounded her. Front, sides, the polished steel ceiling above showing a distorted version from overhead. Everywhere she looked, she saw the evidence of what had happened. Wine in her hair, stains on her dress, the slight smudge of makeup. She looked destroyed, but her posture was perfect. The elevator began its descent, the subtle shift in gravity pressing against her feet. Marci pulled out her phone again, checked the time. 16 minutes until Martin's public statement. 16 minutes until the news broke. She opened her messages, scrolled to the group chat with her executive team. 5 people who'd spent months working on the Meridian deal, who'd vetted every clause, every risk factor, every potential return. Her thumbs moved across the screen. Deal is terminated. Full withdrawal. Details to follow. This was the right call. She hit send and watched the message deliver. Read receipts appeared almost immediately. Someone was typing, then stopped, then started again. Finally, a response from her COO, Patricia, understood. Standing by for debrief. Another message from her head of investments, James, trust your judgment. Whatever happened, we'll handle the fallout. Marci felt something loosen in her chest. Not relief, not yet, but confirmation that she'd built a team that trusted her instincts even when they didn't know the full story. The elevator continued down. Floor numbers ticked past on the digital display. 5, 4, 3. She made another call. This one rang 4 times before connecting. Marci, her assistant, Devin, sounded concerned. I saw your calendar. You were supposed to be at the gala until midnight. Everything okay? I need you to do something for me. Name it. There's going to be a news cycle starting in about 15 minutes. The Meridian deal is dead. I need you to monitor all major financial news outlets, social media, industry forums. Any mention of the termination, any speculation about why, I want to know immediately. On it. Should I prepare a statement from you personally? No. Martin's handling the corporate response. But if anyone from media reaches out directly, forward them to him. No comments from me tonight. Understood. A pause. Marci, what happened? How did she answer that? That she'd been humiliated? Assaulted? That 2 executives had poured wine on her head in front of 200 witnesses and felt justified doing it? I saw who they really were, Marci said finally. And they showed me I made the right decision. Good enough for me. I'll start monitoring now. Thank you, Devin. She ended the call as the elevator reached the ground floor. The doors opened onto an elegant lobby, marble floors, modern furniture, abstract sculptures positioned like sentries. A security guard sat at the front desk, head down, watching something on his phone. Marci stepped out, heels clicking across the lobby floor. The guard looked up, did a double take when he saw her condition. Ma'am, do you need assistance? I'm fine. Is there a restroom nearby? He pointed toward a hallway to the left, just past the elevators. Do you want me to call someone? Security? Medical? That won't be necessary. Marci started walking, then paused and turned back. Actually, in about 10 minutes, there's going to be some activity upstairs. The gala. People might start leaving quickly. Just a heads up. The guard's confusion was evident, but he nodded. Noted. Thank you, ma'am. Marci found the restroom. Pristine, marble counters, ambient lighting, and locked herself inside. She set her clutch on the counter and looked at herself properly in the full-length mirror. The wine had started to dry in places, leaving her hair stiff and her skin sticky. The red dress, so bold an hour ago, now looked like evidence from a crime scene. She could try to clean up, but what was the point? The damage was done. Besides, she wanted to remember this, wanted to carry this feeling, this clarity, forward into every future decision. Do you think Marci should have confronted Sandra and Dan after making the call, or was walking away the ultimate power move? Share your thoughts below. Her phone buzzed. A message from Martin. Termination documents filed. PR statement going live in 8 minutes. Legal team standing by for any pushback from Meridian. Marci typed back. They'll push back. Let them. Our documentation is airtight. Another buzz. Patricia. Board members are asking questions. How much do we tell them? Marci. The truth. Cultural incompatibility discovered during final due diligence. I'll brief them fully tomorrow morning. She pocketed her phone and splashed cold water on her hands, watching the wine tint the water pink as it swirled down the drain. She couldn't wash her face without ruining what remained of her makeup, couldn't fix her hair without a proper shower. So she didn't try. She dried her hands, picked up her clutch, and walked back into the lobby. The security guard tracked her movement, phone already pressed to his ear, speaking in low, urgent tones to someone. Probably his supervisor, reporting the strange woman in the ruined dress. Marci pushed through the lobby doors into the night air. The temperature had dropped. A breeze caught her wet hair, sent a chill across her shoulders. The city lights stretched out before her, buildings climbing toward a dark sky. A black sedan idled at the curb. Martin's doing. The driver stood beside the rear door, professional and expressionless. If he noticed her condition, he gave no indication. Ms. Johnston. He opened the door. Where to? Home. But take the long route. Of course. Marci slid into the leather interior. The door closed with a solid thunk, sealing her into climate-controlled silence. She sank back against the seat, finally allowing her shoulders to drop slightly. Her phone buzzed again. She glanced at the screen. Martin, statement is live. Already getting pickup from Bloomberg, Reuters, Wall Street Journal. Meridian stock is going to open ugly tomorrow morning. Another message, this one from an unknown number. Marci frowned and opened it. Ms. Johnston, this is Marcus Chin from Meridian's business development team. I don't know what happened tonight, but I saw you leave. I hope you're okay. If you need a witness statement for anything, I'm willing to provide one. Marci stared at the message for a long moment. One decent person in a corrupt system. One person who treated her like a professional without needing proof first. She typed, "Thank you, Marcus. That means more than you know. I hope you land somewhere better." She sent it, then immediately added, "My firm is always looking for talent with integrity. If you're ever interested, reach out." His response came quickly, "I might take you up on that." The car pulled away from the curb, merging into light traffic. Through the tinted windows, Marci watched the city slide past. Office buildings where deals were being made. Restaurants where executives celebrated victories. Bars where people unwound after long days. Somewhere above, in that ballroom, Sandra and Dan were still celebrating. Still laughing about the woman they'd humiliated. Still congratulating themselves for protecting their event from an unworthy intruder. Marci checked her watch. 5 minutes until the statement went public. 5 minutes until their world ended. She closed her eyes and allowed herself a moment of something that felt almost like satisfaction. Not pleasure in their pain. She wasn't cruel. But certainty that justice, however delayed, was inevitable. Her phone buzzed one more time. Devin, statement is live. Social media is exploding. Hashtag Meridian Systems is already trending. Someone posted a video from inside the gala. You should see it. Marci's eyes opened. Of course they did. She clicked the link Devin had sent. The video was shaky, clearly shot on a phone from somewhere in the crowd. But the audio was clear. The image sharp enough. It showed Sandra raising the wine glass. Showed Dan standing beside her, arms crossed, smiling. Showed Marci standing perfectly still in her red dress. Showed the wine falling. Showed Marci's silent, dignified exit. The caption read, Meridian Systems executives assault guest at company gala. Leaked. Major investor walks out. It had been posted 6 minutes ago. It already had 40,000 views. The comments section was erupting. Marci closed the video and set her phone face down on the seat beside her. Actually, she said to the driver, forget the long route. Take me home directly. Yes, ma'am. She needed a shower. Needed to wash the wine from her hair and skin. Needed to sleep before tomorrow's reckoning began in earnest. But first, she needed to sit in this car and feel the weight of what she'd just set in motion. The deal was dead. The truth was viral. And Sandra and Dan were about to learn what it cost to humiliate someone they'd never bothered to actually see. Inside the ballroom, the celebration had resumed with forced energy. The jazz trio played something upbeat. Champagne flowed freely. Sandra and Dan held court near the stage, accepting congratulations from a rotating circle of executives who praised their handling of the disruption. You did what needed to be done, a board member assured Sandra, clinking his glass against hers. Can't have people thinking they can just walk into our events. Exactly. Sandra's smile was wide, victorious. Sometimes you have to make an example. Set boundaries. Dan laughed, loosening his tie slightly. Did you see her face? Just standing there like she had any right to. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned, then slid it back into his pocket. Probably nothing urgent. Tonight was about celebration, not work. Across the room, other phones began lighting up. A soft chorus of notification chimes, easily dismissed at first. Just the usual flow of messages, emails, after-hours noise. Then someone gasped. A woman in a silver gown near the bar, staring at her screen with her hand covering her mouth. Her companion leaned in to look, and his expression shifted from curious to horrified. What is it? Someone asked. The woman didn't answer. She just kept staring, scrolling, her face draining of color. More phones emerged. A ripple of activity spreading through the crowd like a wave. Executives pulling devices from pockets and clutches, thumbs moving across screens, expressions changing from confused to concerned to panicked. The music faltered as one of the jazz musicians checked his own phone during a break. He showed it to the pianist, who stopped mid-chord. Near the entrance, the massive display screens that had been cycling through images of the Meridian campus and tonight's celebration suddenly flickered. The cheerful montage vanished, replaced by a stark red banner. Breaking, Meridian Systems partnership terminated. The text was massive, impossible to miss. Beneath it, a news ticker scrolled. Major tech investment firm withdraws from $750 million deal, citing irreconcilable cultural differences, statements expected. Someone dropped their champagne flute. The glass shattered against marble, the sound cutting through the confused murmur rising from the crowd. What the hell? Dan pulled out his phone again, this time with urgency. His screen showed 17 missed calls, 23 new emails, a cascade of text messages still arriving. Sandra's phone was ringing. She answered, her voice sharp. What? No, that's impossible. We haven't even signed the final. Her face went rigid. What do you mean terminated? Who authorized? The screens changed again. Now they showed a professional press release, the kind that got distributed through major financial news wires. Johnston Capital withdraws from Meridian Systems partnership. Effective immediately, Johnston Capital announces the termination of all agreements with Meridian Systems, including the proposed $750 million equity investment and technology partnership. After careful evaluation of corporate culture and values alignment, we have determined this partnership is not viable, said Martin Reynolds, General Counsel for Johnston Capital. We wish Meridian Systems well in their future endeavors. The host rushed onto the stage, his earlier confidence evaporated. He tapped the microphone with shaking hands. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, we're receiving some unexpected news regarding this evening's celebration. The signing ceremony has been suspended pending clarification of. Suspended. A board member's voice boomed from the front row. It's not suspended, Richard. It's dead. The deal is dead. Chaos erupted. Executives surrounded Sandra and Dan, voices overlapping in a crescendo of panic and accusation. How did this happen? Who's Johnston Capital? Do you know what this does to our stock price? The market opens in 12 hours. Sandra tried to speak, but her voice was drowned out. Dan grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the side exit. They needed privacy, needed to figure out what was happening and how to fix it. But they couldn't escape what came next. A junior executive, someone's assistant maybe, stood near the bar with her phone held high. Her voice carried across the ballroom, sharp with disbelief. Oh my God, you guys need to see this. She turned her phone screen toward the crowd. On it, a video played. Shaky footage, but clear enough. Sandra raising a wine glass. Dan standing beside her, arms crossed, smiling. A woman in a red dress standing perfectly still. The wine falling. The woman walking away. That's from tonight, someone whispered. That's from here. Someone recorded it. The assistant's hands trembled as she read the caption aloud. Meridian Systems executives assault guest at company gala. Leaked. Major investor walks out. Her voice cracked. It's already been shared 50,000 times. The ballroom went silent except for the relentless pinging of notifications. Every phone in the room seemed to be receiving the same message, the same link, the same catastrophic video. Sandra's face had gone from flushed to pale. She grabbed for the nearest phone, watched the video herself, watched the moment she'd been so proud of 30 minutes ago, now preserved forever in high definition. We didn't assault anyone. Her voice was defensive, desperate. She was trespassing. She refused to identify herself. We were protecting the event. From whom? A board member's voice cut through like ice. He was older, distinguished, the kind of executive who'd seen corporate disasters before. He held up his own phone, showing the press release. From Johnston Capital? From Marci Johnston. Do you think the video going viral makes this worse for Sandra and Dan? Or would the financial fallout have been enough on its own? Share your thoughts below. Dan's confusion was evident. Who the hell is Marci Johnston? The board member's laugh was harsh, humorless. She's the CEO and majority stakeholder of Johnston Capital, the firm that was about to invest $750 million in our company. His voice rose. The woman you just poured wine on in front of 200 witnesses and God knows how many cameras. The words landed like physical blows. Sandra stumbled backward, catching herself against a table. Dan's face went white. That's not. She never said. How were we supposed to? She was on the guest list. The board member shoved his phone closer. Right here. Marci Johnston, Johnston Capital, VIP access. She RSVP'd 3 weeks ago. Sandra's mouth opened. Closed. No words came out. Around them, the disaster was unfolding in real time. Executives were making calls, trying to control damage that couldn't be controlled. The video was spreading across Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram. Financial analysts were already posting hot takes. Industry insiders were offering commentary. A notification popped up on someone's phone. Bloomberg just picked it up. Lead story. Another voice, Reuters too. They're calling it a spectacular failure of corporate culture. The Wall Street Journal is requesting comment. So is the Financial Times. Sandra grabbed Dan's arm, her nails digging in. We have to call her. We have to apologize. We have to fix this. With what? The board member's voice was bitter. She terminated the deal an hour ago. The legal documents are already filed. It's done. We're done. Someone else checked their phone. Stock futures are already moving. We're down 18% in after-hours trading. 18% on a partnership termination. On a viral video showing leadership assaulting an investor. Yeah, 18%. And climbing. The ballroom had transformed from a celebration into a wake. Guests were leaving in clusters, heading for exits, already distancing themselves from the disaster. No one wanted to be associated with what had happened here tonight. Sandra stood frozen, watching everything collapse around her. The partnership, the stock price, her reputation, her career, all of it crumbling because of one woman in a red dress who'd refused to justify her existence. One woman who turned out to be the only person in the room who actually mattered. Dan's phone rang. His assistant. He answered, listened for 3 seconds, then ended the call. Legal wants us in the office. Now, they're preparing statements. Sandra didn't move. She was still staring at the video playing on loop on someone's phone, watching herself make the biggest mistake of her professional life. Watching it happen over and over again, each view another nail in her coffin. Sandra, Dan's voice was urgent. We have to go. We have to do damage control. But what control was there? The damage was done. The video was viral. The deal was dead. And somewhere out there in the city, Marci Johnston was washing wine from her hair and watching their world burn. The Meridian Executive Conference Room at 11:47 p.m. looked like a war zone. Papers scattered across the mahogany table. Laptops open, screens glowing with financial data that kept getting worse. Half-empty coffee cups abandoned beside phones that wouldn't stop ringing. Sandra sat at one end, her emerald dress wrinkled now, makeup smudged where she'd rubbed her eyes. Dan paced near the windows, tie hanging loose, jacket discarded over a chair. Around them, 8 board members and the company's legal team washed with expressions ranging from fury to resignation. Walk me through it again. Charles Brennan, the board chairman, spoke with the kind of cold precision that preceded terminations. From the beginning. How did this happen? Sandra's voice came out defensive. She wouldn't identify herself. We asked multiple times. You asked a woman on the VIP guest list to identify herself? Charles cut her off. A woman who RSVP'd, who cleared security, who had every right to be exactly where she was standing. We didn't know who she was. Dan's frustration erupted. She was vague, evasive. She refused to name a firm or provide credentials because she didn't need to. The general counsel, a woman named Patricia Reeves, looked exhausted. She was invited. That was her credential. Everything else you demanded? That was ego, not protocol. Sandra's hands clenched on the armrests. She looked out of place. She was alone. No one recognized her. Out of place. Charles repeated the word slowly. That's an interesting phrase. Out of place how exactly? The question hung in the air like a live grenade. Sandra's silence was answer enough. Charles leaned forward. Let me tell you about Marci Johnston, since you clearly did zero research before assaulting her. She's 38 years old. Harvard MBA. Built Johnston Capital from a 3-person operation to a firm managing $4 billion in assets. She's known in investment circles for being brilliant, thorough, and absolutely uncompromising on cultural fit. He pulled up something on his tablet, turned it to face them. A professional photo of Marci, polished, powerful, wearing a navy suit and a subtle smile. She's also known for testing companies before finalizing major investments. She goes to their events, observes how they operate, watches how leadership treats people they don't recognize or don't think matter. His voice hardened. You want to know why she didn't introduce herself? Because she was testing you, and you failed spectacularly. Dan stopped pacing. That's entrapment. That's due diligence. Charles slammed his hand on the table. She came to see if we were worth $750 million. Instead, she got publicly humiliated, and you two gave her every reason to pull out. The door opened. A young associate from the legal team entered, tablet in hand, her face pale. Mr. Brennan, you need to see this. She set the tablet on the table. Another press release, this one more detailed than the first. Johnston Capital issues expanded statement on Meridian withdrawal. Our decision to terminate the Meridian Systems partnership was not made lightly, stated Marci Johnston, CEO and founder of Johnston Capital. During our final evaluation phase, we observed behavior from senior leadership that fundamentally conflicts with our firm's values regarding respect, dignity, and inclusive corporate culture. We cannot in good conscience invest in organizations where such behavior is tolerated or celebrated. The decision is final and non-negotiable. Sandra's face drained of color. She issued a personal statement with her name on it, the associate confirmed. It went out 15 minutes ago. Every major outlet has picked it up. Patricia pulled up her phone, scrolled through something, then looked up with grim certainty. The video has been tied to her statement. Social media is connecting the dots. People are identifying the woman in the red dress as Marci Johnston. How? Dan's voice cracked. How are they identifying her? Someone from inside pulled up the guest list, posted a screenshot. Her name is right there under VIP attendees. Patricia turned her screen around. The image showed the registration page, Marci's name clearly visible. Now everyone knows exactly who you poured wine on. The room fell silent except for the relentless notifications pinging from every device. Another board member, an older woman named Catherine Wells, spoke up. Her voice was quiet but devastating. Do you two understand what you've done? Not just to this deal, but to this company. We were protecting. You were protecting nothing. Catherine's composure cracked. You humiliated an investor because she didn't fit your narrow definition of what power looks like. You made assumptions based on appearance. You assaulted her when she wouldn't submit to your authority. And you did it in front of 200 witnesses with cameras. Sandra's voice turned pleading. We didn't know. If she'd just told us who she was, she shouldn't have had to. Charles's shout echoed off the walls. That's the entire point. Why did she need to justify her presence to you? Why did you assume she didn't belong? What about her made you so certain she was beneath you? The questions landed like accusations because they were accusations. Dan tried a different approach. We can fix this. We'll apologize. We'll make a public statement. We'll reach out to Johnston Capital, and she won't take your calls. Patricia had her phone pressed to her ear, listening to someone on the other end. She lowered it slowly. I just spoke with Martin Reynolds, her general counsel. Johnston Capital's position is clear. No further communication with Meridian leadership. Any attempts to contact Ms. Johnston directly will be considered harassment. Harassment? Sandra stood abruptly. We're trying to apologize. You should have thought about that before you poured wine on her head. The bluntness of Catherine's words silenced the room. Charles pulled up another screen on his tablet. Here's what your actions have cost us. The partnership, $750 million, gone. Stock price, down 22% in after-hours trading. That's approximately $2 billion in market cap evaporated. Reputation damage, incalculable. 3 of our institutional investors have already requested emergency calls for tomorrow morning. He looked up, his gaze moving between Sandra and Dan like a judge reading a sentence. 2 of our biggest clients have sent emails asking if we share the values demonstrated by leadership tonight. 1 is reviewing their contract for early termination clauses. He paused. We're trending on Twitter. Not for our innovation. Not for our growth. For assault and discrimination. Do you think Sandra and Dan genuinely didn't understand what they were doing was wrong? Or did they just not expect consequences? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Sandra sank back into her chair. What do? We? Charles's laugh was bitter. There is no we anymore. Legal is preparing your termination paperwork. Effective immediately. You'll both be escorted out tonight. You're firing us. Dan's disbelief was almost comical. Over one mistake. One mistake. Patricia's voice rose. You assaulted an investor. On camera. At a company event. While representing Meridian Systems. That's not a mistake. That's a career-ending display of judgment so catastrophically bad that it's going to be taught in business school ethics classes. Sandra's hands trembled as she gripped the table. We built this company. 15 years of work. You can't just watch us. Charles stood, gathering his papers. You built nothing. You maintained systems while standing on the backs of people you deemed lesser. Tonight, you showed the world exactly who you are. And the world said no thank you. Another notification chimed. The young associate checked her tablet, her expression stricken. CNN is running the story. They're calling it the $750 million wine incident. CNBC has a panel discussing it, someone else added. They're questioning whether Meridian has a culture problem beyond just these 2. Charles turned to Patricia. Draft a statement. Meridian Systems does not condone the behavior displayed by former executives Sandra Hays and Dan Cooper. They've been terminated. We're conducting a full internal review. Standard crisis language. Former executives, Sandra whispered. Did you expect anything else? Catherine's voice was almost gentle now, which somehow made it worse. You destroyed a $750 million deal because you couldn't treat someone with basic human dignity. You publicly humiliated a woman who held all the leverage. What did you think would happen? Dan's phone buzzed. He looked at it, then at the others. It's my wife. She's seeing the video. She's asking if that's really me. No one responded. What was there to say? Sandra pulled out her own phone with shaking hands. Open Twitter. The video was everywhere. Reactions flooding in by the thousands. Her name was trending. So was Dan's. So was Meridian Systems. None of it was good. She found one comment that captured everything. Imagine being so arrogant you assault the person about to give your company $750 million. Imagine being that confidently wrong. 20,000 likes. Sandra set her phone face down on the table and stared at her hands. The hands that had held that wine glass. The hands that had tilted it forward. The hands that had destroyed everything. Can we? Her voice broke. Can we at least try to contact her? To explain. Explain what? Charles asked. That you're sorry you got caught? That you're sorry there were consequences? Or are you actually sorry you treated another human being like garbage? Sandra had no answer. Charles moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I hope you both learned something from this. But I doubt you will. People like you never think you're the problem. You'll blame her for not announcing herself. You'll blame whoever put her on the guest list. You'll blame the person who recorded it. You'll blame everyone except yourselves. He opened the door. Security waited outside. Escort them out. Make sure they take only personal items. All company devices stay here. Sandra and Dan stood slowly, moving like people in shock. As they walked toward the door, Sandra looked back one final time at the conference room that had hosted so many of her victories. Now it was the site of her greatest defeat. All because of one woman in a red dress who'd refused to justify her existence. One woman they'd never bothered to actually see. The morning headlines were merciless. Wall Street Journal. Meridian Systems loses $750 million deal after executives assault investor at gala. Bloomberg. Johnston Capital CEO speaks out. We cannot invest where dignity isn't valued. Financial Times. Viral video shows corporate culture crisis at Meridian Systems. TechCrunch. The most expensive glass of wine in corporate history. By 9 a.m., Meridian stock had plummeted 31%. Trading was halted twice due to volatility. Institutional investors were fleeing. 3 board members had resigned overnight. The company's crisis management firm had issued a statement so generic it satisfied no one. And somewhere in a penthouse office overlooking the city, Marci Johnston sat at her desk reviewing quarterly reports as if nothing had happened. Her assistant, Devin, knocked softly before entering. Ms. Johnston, there are 2 people in the lobby demanding to see you. Sandra Hays and Dan Cooper. Marci didn't look up from her laptop. I'm not available. They say it's urgent. That they need 5 minutes to apologize. My answer stands. Devin hesitated. Security is asking what to do if they refuse to leave. Have them escorted out. If they return, file for a restraining order. Marci's voice was calm, matter of fact. Anything else? Martin wants to brief you on the media requests. We've received 47 interview requests since last night. Tell Martin my statement stands. No additional comments. She finally looked up, meeting Devin's concerned gaze. I'm fine. Really, this is just business. Devin nodded slowly and left. But in the lobby 30 floors below, Sandra and Dan weren't accepting defeat. You don't understand. Sandra's voice was desperate, pleading with the security guard who stood impassively between them and the elevator bank. We just need 5 minutes. We need to explain what happened. Ms. Johnston has declined your request. The guard's tone was professional, final. I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises. We flew here at 6 in the morning, Dan pressed. We've lost everything. Our jobs, our reputations. The least she can do is hear us out. I'm going to ask one more time. Please leave, or I'll have to call. Call who? Sandra's composure cracked. We're not criminals. We made a mistake. We're trying to make it right. A woman crossing the lobby paused, recognition flashing across her face. She pulled out her phone, angling it toward them. Sandra noticed and turned away, but it was too late. Another person walking past slowed down, staring. Then another. Whisper started. That's them. From the video. What are they doing here? The security guard's voice hardened. You're causing a disturbance. Leave now, or I will call the police. Dan grabbed Sandra's arm. Come on. This isn't working. But Sandra pulled free, her voice rising. Marci Johnston, I know you can hear me. We deserve a chance to apologize. The lobby went quiet. A dozen people stood frozen, watching the spectacle. From somewhere above, an intercom crackled. Marci's voice, calm and clear, filled the space. Mr. Mitchell, please have Ms. Hays and Mr. Cooper removed from the building. If they return, contact the authorities. Sandra's face crumpled. Please, just 5 minutes. We lost everything because of one mistake. The intercom clicked off. 2 additional security guards appeared from a side entrance. Ma'am, sir, we need you to come with us. Dan raised his hands in surrender. We're leaving. We're leaving. But Sandra stood rooted, staring up at the building's glass ceiling as if she could see through 30 floors to where Marci sat. It wasn't supposed to be like this. We were protecting our event. We didn't know. Not knowing doesn't make it acceptable. The voice came from behind them. An older black woman in an elegant suit, carrying a leather briefcase. She walked past them toward the elevators, paused, and looked back. You didn't know because you didn't bother to look. That's not ignorance. That's arrogance. She swiped her key card and disappeared into the elevator. Sandra felt something break inside her. The reality of what they'd done, not just the assault, not just the ruined deal, but the fundamental failure of character it represented, finally crashed through her defenses. I didn't mean to. Her voice was small. We thought we were doing the right thing. One of the security guards, a young man who'd been watching with barely concealed disgust, spoke quietly. The right thing would have been treating her like a human being. Maybe try that next time. They were escorted through the lobby, past the staring faces and recording phones, out into the bright morning sunlight that felt too harsh, too exposing. On the sidewalk, Dan pulled out his phone. What now? Sandra had no answer. Her own phone had been buzzing nonstop since last night. Texts from former colleagues, voicemails from journalists, emails from lawyers. She'd stopped reading them hours ago. A car pulled up to the curb. Not a taxi. A black sedan with tinted windows. The rear window rolled down. Marci Johnston sat in the back seat, her expression unreadable. She was dressed in a charcoal suit, her hair styled perfectly, no trace of the woman who'd been drenched in wine 12 hours earlier. Get in, she said quietly. Sandra and Dan exchanged glances, then scrambled for the door. The interior smelled like leather and cold determination. Marci sat with her hands folded in her lap, gaze fixed straight ahead. Do you think Marci is making a mistake by giving them this opportunity? Or is she about to teach them a lesson they'll never forget? Let us know below. Ms. Johnston, Sandra started. Don't. Marci's voice was soft, but absolute. I didn't ask you here to listen to apologies. I asked you here so you understand exactly why you failed. The car pulled into traffic, moving through the city with smooth efficiency. You think you lost the deal because of a phone call. Because I overreacted. Because you made one mistake in an otherwise perfect evening. Marci finally turned to look at them. You're wrong. Dan leaned forward. Then help us understand. Tell us what we could have done differently. You could have seen me. The simplicity of the statement was devastating. Not my credentials. Not my title. Not my firm. Me. A human being standing in a room who deserved basic dignity, whether I was a CEO, or a server, or someone who wandered in off the street. We were trying to maintain security. You were maintaining hierarchy, Marci corrected. There's a difference. Security is about protecting people. What you did was about protecting your sense of who belongs and who doesn't. Your sense of who deserves respect and who needs to earn it. Sandra's voice was barely a whisper. We didn't mean it that way, didn't you? Marci's gaze was unflinching. Be honest. When you looked at me standing in that ballroom, what did you see? The silence that followed was suffocating. You saw someone out of place, Marci continued. Someone who didn't fit your image of power. Someone you could dismiss, interrogate, humiliate, and remove without consequence. You saw someone whose dignity was negotiable. That's exactly what happened. Marci's voice hardened. And when I refused to play by your rules, when I wouldn't submit to your authority or justify my existence to your satisfaction, you escalated. You didn't just ask me to leave. You punished me. Publicly. Deliberately. You wanted to make an example of me. Dan's face had gone pale. We thought we were protecting the company. From what? From me? Marci shook her head slowly. I was offering you $750 million. A partnership that could have transformed your company. And you were so focused on maintaining your power, your comfort, your narrow definition of who belonged in that room, that you destroyed it. The car turned onto a quieter street, pulled to a stop. You didn't lose the deal because of a phone call, Marci said, her words deliberate and final. You lost at the moment you believed my worth was less than your entitlement. The moment you decided your discomfort mattered more than my dignity. The moment you chose cruelty over curiosity. She reached for the door handle, then paused. You want to know the worst part? If you'd simply treated me like you'd treat any other guest, with basic courtesy and respect, I probably would have signed that deal. Your financials were solid. Your technology was impressive. But culture eats strategy for breakfast. And your culture is toxic. We can change, Sandra said desperately. We can learn from this. Give us another chance. Marci stepped out of the car, then leaned back in. I don't give second chances to people who needed a $750 million disaster to learn basic human decency. That lesson should have been learned decades ago. She straightened, adjusted her suit jacket. The deal is gone. My door is closed. What you do with the rest of your lives is your decision. But I hope you remember this. Power without character is just cruelty with a better address. She closed the door with a quiet click. The car pulled away, leaving Sandra and Dan on an unfamiliar street corner with nothing but the weight of consequences they brought entirely on themselves. Behind them, the city continued its relentless forward motion. Deals being made, partnerships forming, opportunities created and destroyed with every decision, every choice, every moment of truth when character was tested. Sandra watched Marci walk away, poised, powerful, unbroken, and finally understood what they'd really lost. Not just money, not just a deal, the chance to be better than they were. And they'd poured it away like wine.
Thanks so much for watching till the end. If this story moved you, you're going to love what's coming next. It's even more surprising and emotional than this one. Go ahead and click the story on your screen right now, and see you in the next story.